Sairam, good afternoon, and welcome to the fourth technical session on the Global Conference on Uniting Religions Through Spiritual Wisdom. The theme for this afternoon's session is the messenger and the message. And the goal of this session is to understand the messages of the messengers in their entirety. We have three speakers today. First will be Geshe Loro Sangpo, a Tenzin Gyatso scholar from the Ganden Tangsa Monastery in India. We also Our second speaker will be Ms. Gulsha Begum, who is the chairperson of the Divine Abode Foundation India. And our final speaker will be Dr. A.K. Merchant, the General Secretary of the Temple of Understanding India Foundation and member, National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of India. We will begin with Geshe Loro Sangpo. He was born in Tibet and came to India in 1992, and he enrolled in the Ganden Changsa Monastery and studied Buddhist philosophy for more than 20 years. In addition to this, he had great exposure to science education, and he was one of the first Tenzin Gyatso scholars who got the opportunity to study science at Emory University for 3 years. After graduating, he has primarily been teaching science to the monastics, and presently, he is serving as the supervisor of the Unit B Tukdam project and science teacher of Ganden Jangsa Monastery. He will address us on the topic, a close analysis on the lives of the messengers from the Buddhist perspective.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to express my deepest heartfelt gratitude to Sadguru Shri Madhusudan Sai and all the organizers, staffs, those who have contributed so much for the success of this conference and all other noble activities. And it is truly my pleasure and honor to be part of this gathering. Not just gathering, but gathering for the unity under the theme of uniting religious through the wisdom, spiritual wisdom. Some of you may know that the promotion of religious harmony is the second commitment of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Therefore, my participation and contribution on this matter actually gives me some sort of satisfaction for fulfilling his vision. Therefore, thank you. My topic is closely analyzing the life of the messenger, the Buddha, under the theme of messenger and message, and specifically to speak about 5 lessons from the Buddha's life. So if you just look back into the Buddha's historical aspect and his journey, he was born as a prince of a wealthy family kingdom, and that had all the positions, all the power of that time. But the Buddha was not enchanted by these worldly prosperities. Instead of that, actually, he abandoned all these in search of solution for the suffering that he'd witnessed during his trip to outside the palace. So through this approach or decision or determination, with clear vision, with great purpose, he became who he was. So from this incident, what we can learn, what we can take as a message. So let me begin by sharing a story. A man was about to leave his room to somewhere in the late evening and holding a key in his hand. All of a sudden, the power goes off and he accidentally drops his key in his hand. And then he tried to grope on the ground, searching the key, but he couldn't find it. So he decides to go outside. And in the street, there is a solar-powered light. And he decided to search underneath of that. And he searched. As he was searching, someone came close to him and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He says, "I have lost my key." "Oh, then I help you," the person responds. And then both of them search for the key. As time goes on, since they couldn't find it, the person who just joined helping asks, "Where did you lose the key?" He says, "I lost it in my room." Then the person with frustration reacts with frustration, saying, "What a stupid, what a foolish." So does this one sound foolish? Searching solution where it can never be found. Just think about it. Does this story really illustrates or resembles the way how we search happiness? Somewhere in the outside, somewhere in the material value, somewhere in the visibility, fame, position, all these things. So, the Buddha abandoning all the prosperity and searching solution for the suffering. This, I think it gives a lesson of searching for happiness not through the possessions of material values and high position and so on and on, but only through the transformation of our inner mind. Because our true enemy lies inside of us, inside our mind stream, and not outside there. In relation to this, the Acharya Shandideva, the great Indian scholar, states, in Tibetan version, "Simjin misu nangkanda teda shomji yumenu, rangi sendi chi chomna dadi tomji chomnanda." So basically, it says that the unruly people is everywhere like the space. It is unfeasible to suppress them all. Once the mind is tamed, it is equal to suppressing all the enemies, and it goes on. For example, in Tibetan version, the shloka, the stanza, the verse, basically it says that if the earth is full of thorns, and as a preventive method, if we attempt to cover leather all over the surface of the earth, that attempt will be some sort of very foolish way because very unrealistic. So leathered merely on the sole of shoes is equal to covering all the surface of the earth. So basically, if we really equipped our mind with some sort of positive energy and regulation, then we will be able to overcome all the suffering. And then it goes on also. So basically it means the one who conquers hatred, attachment, and mental afflictions are the true warrior and triumphant. And those who kill other people in a sense of regarding them as enemy, in principle, it says, it is equivalent to killing a corpse or already dead body, because even if you don't kill, they are going to die anyway. The death is certain. So in that sense, Seeing negative emotion as enemy is not only helpful to target the source of suffering, but it also assists us to be more endurance for other people's misbehavior. For example, also quote from the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Basically what it says is that when someone uses a stick to beat you, and at that time, we don't get anger or frustration at the stick that is being used by the person. Instead, we get anger the one who wielded it, the agent, the person. The reason is because we think the stick is being used by that person. Then the logical approach to challenge that, it says, if that was the case, then the person himself is also impelled by his negative emotion, his hatred. And then if you really meant to get anger, show frustration, then you are supposed to show frustration to his negative emotions and not the person himself. And another sense, so basically it says, when someone is overtaken by negative emotion, in worst case, one will even harm him or herself because they lost their control. The negative emotion is so powerful. So how could one not harm other in that state of mind? It is understandable. Similar to this, the Tignaha says, when other person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply from within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment at that time. What he needs is, he needs help, he needs soothing. So in brief, it is said that the Buddha sees negative emotion as the enemy and not the person associated with it. If someone bugs and irritates, makes you suffer, then maybe we should blame the negative emotion and not the person, him or herself. So in that sense, if we know the art and skills of wisdom to tackle and care for a negative and positive mental quality, then happiness is ours. Therefore, as a first step, recognizing the source of happiness and suffering in the right way is crucial for spiritual development, particularly in today's world, where the advancement of technology and material development deteriorates our mental quality by sucking its energy outwardly. And from the scientific studies, we could see so many attention deficiency. It's becoming some sort of, mental epidemic. So in this time, turning into our inner development is much more needed than ever before. Taking care of inner value, His Holiness Dalai Lama refers to it as hygiene of emotion. Second example, an incident in relation to Buddha's life story that I would love to touch on is, while Buddha was meditating on a large rock in a forest, he encountered a young man called Yasa, a son of a wealthy merchant in Varanasi. The young man had all the splendor and ease, but he was thoughtful and sensitive. He felt a suffocating indulgence of pleasure and was longing for fresh air and a simple life that is peaceful and wholesome. Buddha counseled him, stating that to drown in sensual pleasure is bad for the health of both body and mind. To drown in sensual pleasure is bad for the health of both body and mind. So in this statement, Buddha advised us that we should not be mistaken to see pleasure as genuine happiness. Pleasure and happiness are different. So pleasure arises from sensorial engagement to various activity, and they are mostly dependent on triggers from the environment. If we seek happiness through sensual pleasure, then we can never find genuine and long-lasting happiness. Seeking happiness on the sensorial pleasure is equal to searching happiness in outside material resources. When our happiness becomes dependent on outside resource, we are bound to suffer because the outside resources are limited and not available all the time. In addition to this, we easily get bored of any material resource and losing the intensity of pleasure, excitement, and entertainment in it. As a result, we start to shift to find pleasure in another resource. And it goes on with unending fashion. Finally, instead of finding so much happiness, we trap in a lot of suffering. In worst case, indulgence of the sensual pleasure leads to addiction. Addiction of drug, alcohol, sex are just result of pursuing happiness on sensorial pleasure. The third, while Buddha was meditating under a tree, one of the turning point realization was seeing the interdependent nature of the reality, which is the core concept of Buddhism for spiritual development. I think it has a significant and effective application for today's world. If we observe how we treat other people, we tend to think they have nothing to do with us. We tend to think they are irrelevant for us. In reality, it is the opposite. We are surviving because of other people. If we just take one example of a simple meal, maybe a breakfast, how many people could have contributed for that meal? Think about all the ingredients where the seeds were planted. And think about the transportation where these different ingredients could have been imported from. Think about the cooking, all the utensils utilized for the cooking, including gas and all the tools used for it, where this tool could have been made from, Think about the place where the cooking has taken place, who could have built it. So through this assessment, we could see how many people were involved just for a simple meal. Now, think about how many meals we have had so far to nourish our body in our whole lives. If one simple meal is contributed by so many people, the meals we have had so far in our whole life must have come from the contributions of millions of people. In brief, our physical growth is nourished by millions and millions of other people. Similarly, if we think about our mental growth, everything we have, whatever we have, the knowledge, the idea, the intelligence, education, or the spirituality, where these have come from? Basically, we have been gaining these informations from our teachers, our parents, our friends, and news, and so many other resources. Therefore, both of our mental and physical growth is nourished and cared by other people. So there is no to hold proud that I did something. There's no way to be really egoistic. Through this way, we truly feel the gratitude of other people for giving us so much. And as the fourth point, I would like to share the practice of equanimity, which could fundamentally change our outlook if we seriously integrate this concept in our day-to-day life. We do have so many identities. Yes, religious identity, national identity, and caste identity. But the underlying unavoidable truth is that we all are just human beings, not more, not less than this. We were born without any religious and national identity. We were born simply as a human beings. All the identity that we hold so much are adapted later in our growing environment, but the shared humanity is deeply ingrained in our blood and essence of biological nature. If we carefully observe both of our physical and mental constitutes, there is no differences between any of us. Genetically, we are descended from the same common ancestor and share more than 99% of the genetic composition material. Mentally, on the fundamental level, we all, in terms of our aspiration, we all want happiness and no one wants suffering. Therefore, there is no foundation for discrimination, but solid foundation for oneness of 7 billion human beings. As the fifth point, as a conclusion, I also want to end it by sharing a common story. There was a saint walking in the forest along with a small kid. And he was introducing the kid about us having two forces, and these two forces fighting all the time. The two forces are the evil force and the virtual force. And then the kid asked a question. Who's gonna win at the end? Then the response from the saint was, whoever we feed the most is going to win the battle. So in that sense, it is the matter of cultivation, instilling the positive mental qualities. So on this ground, on this basis, let me just cultivate our own in one religion, which is love, compassion, and kindness. Let me just be embodiment of this positive mental quality. And let me just, all this positive mental quality be ingrained in the deep nature of our essence and in our blood. And let these essence, inner core, radiate in service of other people. Example, the example we have witnessed in these 2 days. Master Sadguru Shri Madhusudan Sai, and like His Holiness the Lama and other spiritual masters have been radiating their inner core through their love, through their compassion, and contributing so much in service of other people. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geshe Lodro Sangpo, for such an engaging talk and for those wonderful lessons from the life of Buddha, who led a life of simplicity and left behind a legacy of service, love, and finding eternal happiness from within. Our next speaker is Ms. Gulsha Begum. Ms. Gulsha Begum hails from a family of Sufi saints. A mystic, clairvoyant, healer, and artist, she has been blessed with a series of visions and transcendental experiences through the process of Kundalini awakening. The divine goddess initiated her on the spiritual path and taught her the Vedas, Quran, Bible, Torah, and many more. She has extensively promoted interfaith harmony through her various initiatives, conferences, and programs to build a culture of peace. She really wanted to be with us today, but unfortunately could not at the last moment. But she will share with us an analysis of the unifying wisdom projected in all religions through a special video message. May we have the video, please?
Good morning, everybody. Assalamu alaikum and namaskar. My sincere pranam in the lotus feet of Bhagwan Sri Sathya Sai Baba and my humble pranam to Sadguru Sri Madhusudan, who is instrumental to make me a part of his blessed family. So I'm so thankful for it. Distinguished brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. It's such an honor to be a part of this event, though I could not make it physically, but so happy that my spirit is there today and yet can speak on my favorite topic, uniting religions through spiritual wisdom. Before we move forward, I would like to just give you a small brief on what Sufism is all about. So Sufism originated after the death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in 632, but it developed into orders only after the 12th century. So the orders were formed around spiritual founders who gained saint status and shrines were built in their names. So this way there are dozens of Sufi orders and offshoots. And Sufism basically focuses on the renunciation of worldly things, purification of the soul, and the mystical contemplation of God's nature, exactly what every religion teaches you. Followers try to get closer to God by seeking spiritual learning known as the tariqa. So, tariqa means path or a method. So the tariqa can be explained in this way that the soul has to go through 7 valleys and before it reaches the gates of the Almighty. So in short, you can say that Sufism can be described as Islamic mysticism, in which through belief and practice it helps a Muslim attain nearness to Allah by way of direct personal experience of God. And there are many types of Sufism, but Sufism was divided into 2. Bashara, Ba-Shara, those who followed the Islamic law, and Bi-Shara, that is Bishara, those who were not bound by Islamic law. So depending on the order and country, they will either have the same concept or slightly altered. But there is another way, even in Sufism, and that is they call it Lataif. So which means, Lataif means the energetic centers of your body. So this, most traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Kabbalah, Sufism, they all have energy work as part of their path. And this energy work, this Lataif, Chakra, Dantiyan, Zohar, all these are the same meaning. It's just the words are different. So with my own experience, I can say this with confidence that then when there is an awakening, it's not in your control as to how the awakening can take place. Most of these are theory, but true awakening is something which one who has experienced can actually explain it in the right way. However, coming back to the energetic centers in the subtle body, as mentioned, most traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Sufism, Kabbalah have energy work as part of their path. You call it chakras, you call it Dantiyan, you call it Lataif, you call it Zohar. So energy is between the physical and mental. So it can affect both. And definitely it will affect you physically and mentally during the process. And this with confidence that then when there is an awakening, it's not in your control as to how the awakening can take place. Most of these are theory, but true awakening is something which one who has experienced can actually explain it in the right way. However, coming back to the energetic centers in the subtle body, as mentioned, most traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Sufism, Kabbalah have energy work as part of their path. You call it chakras, you call it Dantiyan, you call it Lataif, you call it Zohar. So energy is between the physical and mental. So it can affect both. And definitely it will affect you physically and mentally during the process. And it takes anyways between 8 to 12 years to come out of it. And until 8 to 12 years, you are on the path. If you manipulate energy, you can increase the health of your body and help to purify the mind. When body, energy and mind is purified to a certain degree, it's much easier to continue on the spiritual path and finally you reach the divine level. However, we now understand that in all religions, the concept is the same, but names and methods vary. The similar teaching in Sufism, just like the Kundalini awakening, is the 7 stations of the nafs. Nafs is the soul, as extensively referred in the Quran. So indeed we have a chakra prevalent teaching in Sufism, but it focuses on the soul and the purification levels of the soul, exactly the same as in any other system of spiritual awakening. If you want to awaken your Kundalini or whatever chakras or Lataif as in Sufism, then you have to follow a guru or a sheikh, and you can also of course follow multiple gurus and sheikhs. So there's no any kind of foundation. However, in rare cases when there is a sudden awakening that takes place, it's like you have been chosen to go through this. In such situations, the divine is your teacher and guru. You simply have to follow the guidance of the divine Almighty. When during Salah you started seeing Allah or the Bhagwan or divine, is something that can only happen when your soul is purified. If I have to put it in another word, the experiences that begin in the awakening journey to reach the Almighty is nothing but it's simply the burning of your karmas of all past, present, future, everything combined together, and it will be burnt in this life in a short span of few years. So you can imagine the roller coaster ride one has to go through before peace is attained. That's why they say everyone's journey cannot be the same and each one's is different. Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in many occasions to awaken your soul. Once he said, the person who does zikr or you call it the mantra all the time will be able to awaken your soul, and he does not do that, the person, it's simply the burning of your karmas of all past, present, future, everything combined together, and it will be burnt in this life in a short span of few years. So you can imagine the roller coaster ride one has to go through before peace is attained. That's why they say everyone's journey cannot be the same and each one's is different. Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in many occasions to awaken your soul. Once he said, the person who does zikr or you call it the mantra all the time will be able to awaken your soul, and he does not do that, the person is like a piece of wood who has been cut off from his root and it is dry and ready to be burnt in fire. If our body is not awakened, then we start working our way up towards achieving these higher states of consciousness. As said earlier, the names and methods may vary, but ultimately it all leads to the same road. The path may be different, and here the path is the religion. So the path may be different, but ultimately the journey is the same. Because after a point, you have to join the main highway to reach the ultimate. This clearly shows that when we join the main highway, which leads to the kingdom of the divine, then all religions cease and they become one. And each soul merges with the spirit and realize that religion is just an outer cover and the inner religion is only one and only universal religion called spiritualism. This is the only religion of the spirit. This is when we realize that religion is just man-made. And trust me, this is the most beautiful part of the journey, when the soul and the spirit unite to become one and cease to be two different minds. Everything between them is united to be one, so there's no second thought. So did you know that Bibi Fatima, she was the first Sufi saint of India. A simple woman who didn't show off her saintliness. Bibi Fatima was dear to many, including Nizamuddin Aulia, who thought of her as an elder sister. Bibi Fatima, she belonged to Sam, a place on the Iraq-Iran border, but came to India in response to an inner urge. She eventually settled down in Delhi, where she later died. But her shrine is situated somewhere in Bapanagar. So, in the 13th century, the place was wilderness, far removed from the seat of the government of the slave dynasty founded by Kutubuddin Aibak. Bibi Fatima's faith was based on the final meeting of the beloved. She did not ever marry but passed her life in the love of Allah through meditation and mystic experience. This is called personal experience. Nizamuddin Aulia called her Apa, a term used for elder sister. So they visited her out of the way abode after hearing reports of her piety and spiritual eminence. Those, according to some, they had come to know of her through their meditation. So basically, Fatima was a simple woman who did not show off her saintliness. But she was a spiritual recluse for whom religion was just an outer covering, because a Sufi is different from a mere adherent of faith for whom only fasting, prayer and good works constitute a good life. The wandering of the mind and spirit are limitless, and it is thus that the true Sufi is constantly attuned to the eternal. From this, we understand that Sufism is actually a broader style of worship that transcends sects, directing followers' attention inward. Whether we speak of Sufism or Kundalini awakening or any other similar, it is definitely a challenging psychophysical episode. Usually, it comes during the practice. Just like Sufism, awakening Kundalini is achieved through a variety of sacred practices rooted in Hinduism. Traditionally in India, in ancient times, yogis would prepare themselves so that they can safely experience a Kundalini awakening. When the energy is knocking on the door of our highest calling has come, whatever symptoms you are experiencing, try not to fixate too much on whether it is Kundalini awakening or whether it is an awakening. Instead, focus on following the energy to move through you and working to heal any uncomfortable symptoms coming on a holistic level. The less you resist these feelings, the quicker they will pass. It is true that once your latte for Kundalini awakens, life will never be the same. Your entire system, mind, body and spirit goes through a massive energetic upgrade, causing you to move through life in a very different way. It's not just feelings of blissfulness, enhanced psychic abilities, more compassion and empathy, increased creativity, increased spiritual connection. But also at the end of the journey, your diet changes, your job, relationship, and your entire life is shifted to match the new way of being after awakening. Finally, coming to the end of my talk, I want everyone to answer one thing, though I'm physically not there to see your reply, but I'm sure I know what your reply is. Are you ready to discover your life's purpose and activate your fullest potential? Yes or no? That's an yes. All the best to all of you present here, and once more my humble thanks to Sadguru Madhusudan, Mr. Narasimha Murthy and my dearest spiritual sister Bhuvana. Thank you to all of you for your spirit and enthusiasm. Let the blessings of the Almighty prevail on everyone. Sai Ram and Allah Hafiz.
Thank you, Ms. Gulsha, for that wonderful unifying message of oneness and from the perspective of Sufism. Our final speaker for this session is Dr. A.K. Merchant, who is the General Secretary of the Temple of Understanding India Foundation and member of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of India. He also serves as a National Trustee, Sarvodaya International Trust, and is a visiting faculty at the Center for Cultural Resources and Training, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. He is also a subject expert for research scholars enrolled for Interfaith Education and Indian Culture of the Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund, and a naturopath and counselor for positive psychotherapy. He has been an active member of the Baha'i Faith since 1975 and has represented the Temple of Understanding as well as the Baha'i community of India at numerous international conferences, symposiums, and seminars over the years. He will address us on the topic, exploring the underlying essence of all the religions as a panacea to today's societal problems, and we request him to share a summary of the session as a conclusion to the technical sessions of this conference. Dr. A.K. Merchant, please.
Who actually are a source of inspiration by demonstrating the virtues of patience, good manners, kindness, love. And I think all of this is a reflection of the spiritual place that we are all met for this global conference. I'm also beholden to Sadguru Madhusudan Sai and his spiritual preceptor and guide, Sathya Sai Baba. Actually, I also have a attachment, connection. I served as a senior faculty for 2 years at the Sathya Sai International Center for Human Values. When I formally retired, my full-time service with the Baha'i community for 24 years, but I continue to serve the community gratis as a national trustee and also the Delhi Baha'i community, because I moved into the field of development, social work, research. So I consider myself as a social worker and a bit of a researcher, and just a learner. To me, I'm going to be a lifelong learner. I have been, and I should always be. That's one of my prayers to the divine. So friends, I'm also thankful to all the adults who are present at this audience. And for the past 2.5 days, ever since we landed at Muddenahalli, we have been enjoying a wonderful spiritual ambience. So in starting my presentation, of course, if I have to thank all the trustees, the entire galaxy of friends who surround Sadguru and are part of his wonderful team, it would be time-consuming. So in fact, when we were talking to our sister, Sai Jyoti, she said that if you wish to mention all the names is fine, but if you don't wish, also doesn't matter. We are not going to diminish in any form our services, our dedication and devotion. So if, with your permission, since I have been given also the added task of summarizing, and this is the last session, and you have been enjoying the day with the spectacular band, that our, a wizard of musician, Mr. Dimitri Labernos. I hope I got his last name correct. But every day, as human beings, when we wake up, what do we experience? I'm glad to know that at this Sathya Sai University and Learning Center, children are protected from the television, from the newspapers, from the social media. Because a lot of things that come out, they talk about somewhere some terrorist has exploded a bomb, or some bus has fallen into a gorge, or some politician has done something so startling and so damaging that it has added a fresh measure of misery and suffering. So every day, these pieces of news, they are so jarring. They are so shocking to us. But there was also one accident. Perhaps you may not have heard of that. And what did that accident do? It was an accident of a minivan loaded with hundreds of Rogers Thesaurus. Now, Thesaurus is not a name of a dinosaur. Dinosaurus. It collided with a speeding freight train. And what happened? The witnesses were horrified, astounded, shocked, surprised, thunderstruck, startled, jolted, jarred, staggered, taken aback, bowled over, shaken, and reacted as if they had been hit by a bolt from the blue. So friends, this is the world we are living in. In fact, this thesaurus, these accidents of life are described in all of these words. So every day, as ordinary human beings, we experience this. And in this concluding technical session, where we are supposed to experience a convergence of sorts of how religion or dharma, for me, sometimes in India, we get also carried away by semantics. For me, religion, dharma, mazhab, deen, these are referring to the same essential quality. So I will come to the first slide a little later. So they are referring to one and only thing, the outpouring of divine guidance that has come to humanity from time to time, from age to age, through spiritual luminaries who appear at a certain time on the global scene, and they provide us the divine nectar, which changes our lives and which helps us to once again go into deep introspection and align ourselves with what possibly could be the will of the divine for the age in which we live. So one fact that is all-pervasive is that this planet, this small globe, this pale and blue dot in this vast, endless universe is our homeland. All of our lives are intertwined. We are interdependent. And we are one planet, one family. It's not a new concept, it's a very ancient concept. And in India, it was epitomized in the words, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Because in those days, when the Rishi Munis had to convey this concept of interdependence and oneness, they used the analogy of a family. And they said that the world is but one family. They also taught us, Ekam Sat, Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Truth is one. The wise may describe it, may call it by different names. So while we are able to appreciate the diversity in nature and in creation, we also need to accept with our mind and heart the underlying principle of unity. It's only when we accept this concept of unity can we appreciate the diversity. The garden is a panorama of flowers, fragrances, colors, shapes, and size. And the garden provides us also the underlying principle of unity, and it provides us the diversity, and it makes it so enchanting for us. So we love to experience nature. So coming to the slides, please kindly screen the first one. The first one is not here, okay. All right. Yeah, that's true. They have omitted the few lines which I had given in the beginning, where I thanked individuals who were in charge of the Sathya Sai Annapurna Trust, who were in charge of the Sathya Sai, the University of Excellence, and various other organizations, the hospitals. Yesterday we went to a tour of the hospital, and we were amazed. This was the first time in my life I stepped into a hospital where there is no counter for receiving any money. And all the people, the staff, the nurse, the cleaning, and the doctors, their sense of dedication and devotion. When will we have a world that is exemplified universally by this kind of love for all of humanity. So it starts off, of course, with this. So the sense of deep compassion and concern for the plight of humanity in this turbulent age, full of turmoil, upheavals, massive dislocation of human populations, is an unacceptable tragedy impacting millions of people all over the world. And that's the reason I cited all those synonyms from the thesaurus. And as I was just mentioning, let's go back. I should, where is it? Shall I come back? I didn't check. What is that? I don't see the back one. Okay, let's go back. Yeah. Yes. So friends, as I was mentioning, for us who are met to understand whether religion can indeed be a panacea for the ills, the societal ills that humanity is experiencing, I for one believe that yes, we as human beings cannot live without religion, without dharma, without the spiritual teachings which the founders of all these great religions, right from the times of the Vedas, have bequeathed to humanity. So religion or dharma is the outpouring of divine guidance, and if you look at it from that perspective, we'll also realize that it is evolutionary. A good thing about the world of science is that they accept this evolutionary principle. Just imagine what would be happening to this planet had our scientists been hooked to the Newtonian paradigm of understanding the world and the universe. Would we have advanced? If you had got stuck to the Einsteinian paradigm or to the quantum physics and mechanics. We had a very erudite presentation by our Mr. Jayant Kapatkar. I hope I've got your last name correct. The way you explained it, and there were also many others who spoke. So in this last presentation, in fact, I want to also remind all the audience that the inaugural talk by Sadguru also was so all-encompassing. He addressed the core principles from all the different religions, and he very nicely tied it up together and brought about a sense of convergence. And we have seen that same flow in the talks, the presentations, both the virtual ones as well as those in person, where these themes flowed through. And at times we felt like soaring up high into the sky, a bird, and then other times coming back to terra firma, the ground, the brass tacks, the mundane reality that keeps hitting us all the time. So both these things happen because a human being is Atma and is also the Sharira, the body and the soul. So there are many qualities of this rational soul, and one of its qualities is the spirit of life. And the body, of course, is made up of the Pancham Bhuta, and it has to be connected to the world of matter, and it has its own requirements. Every human being requires certain amount of food so that the body can sustain itself, certain amount of time to sleep and rest, certain amount of human touch, fellowship, the love and affection. Today, it's so tragic that millions of children around the world, especially those who are in the places of conflict, have lost their parents. And I've worked with an NGO based in Canada where one of the tasks they had to perform was to provide foster parents to children whose parents had been killed in wars or conflicts. Because any child deprived of the parents' love in the early years of its life, it becomes dysfunctional. So by looking for foster parents, that child would then once again begin to feel that sense of love. Because love is the positive attribute, not hate. Light is the positive quality, not darkness. It's the absence of darkness, it's the absence of light which we describe as darkness. It's absence of love, which results in hate, jealousy. So friends, we as human beings are essentially spiritual in nature, and therefore there's always that longing for something beyond this tangible material world. Our quest for divinity. Sages, seers, spiritual luminaries, great Mahapurush, avatars, they have all shared some bit of their experience, because no one can get a total grasp of that transcendental reality, because it's impossible for the contingent to understand the absolute. And I can scientifically prove it, because whatever we know of the universe today is only 5%. 95% of it is unknown. And now with this James Webb Space Telescope, our knowledge about the universe or the metaverse or the multiverse is going to phenomenally expand. So on the one hand, human beings have advanced to such an extent that they are able to probe into the very beginning of what is so-called the Big Bang Theory and take us some 13.5 billion years back. And on the other hand, we are also faced with a basic existential reality, where the vast majority are trying to find ways to survive. Food, clothing, shelter, employment, sense of security, education, health. So you see, we live in a world that's very, very strange. So coming to the scriptures of all the different religions, my study tells me that the scriptures have lost none of their validity. No one who sincerely poses question to heaven would fail to detect an answering voice in the Psalms or the Upanishads. And anyone with some intimation of that ultimate reality that transcends this material one will be touched to the heart by the words in which Jesus or the Buddha speaks so intimately of. The Quran's apocalyptic visions continue to provide compelling assurance to its readers that the realization of justice is central to the divine purpose. Nor in the essential features do the lives of the heroes and saints seem less meaningful than they did when those lives were lived centuries ago. So the sacrifice of every spiritual luminary, many of them had to pay with their lives. They keep coming to us again and again as perfect examples of how human beings should live. They exemplified the spirit of detachment and renunciation from the material world. They only took so much as was needed. They lived a life that showed the power of love, the power of compassion, of kindness, of generosity, of camaraderie. So like this, it can go on. I mean, I've not taken the names of all the saints. So the problem that at times we experience, again, the elephant, the Gajraj Maharaj is often used for many purposes. We use it for our management classes and we use it for our spiritual discourses. So when a person lacks a totality of vision or an all-encompassing vision of this planet, then you experience what those blind men who wanted to, within quotes, see how an elephant looked, experienced. So each one held on to his own immediate, perception. If somebody had held the legs, would say it's like a pillar or a tree, or was poked by the teeth, the trunk, the tusk, we'll say the elephant is like a sphere, or if we held the trunk like the snake, or the tail like the rope, so like that, or if touched the sides, say it was like a wall, that I am right about how the elephant looks. And so the friend who, of course, could see the whole thing, he calmed them and said, all of you are right. Only thing, you need to change your places to get a better understanding. So at times we do see from our leaders, very often the leaders, if they come to a village or they give a public talk and thousands of people gather and he or she claims that I have the solution to the problems that you are experiencing. But alas, once the votes have been taken, the leader forgets whatever promises were made. And the people continue in their suffering. And the leader himself or herself had no clue about the totality of the problem. So one of the things that we have to learn, and which I'm very thrilled to know, that in our Sathya Sai University for Human Excellence, they do a lot of consultation. They exchange. They're willing to listen to each other. And very often there are conflicts, and for simple reasons, it escalates because we are not prepared to listen. So one story that I've learned about the 6 blind men, or the 5 blind men, or the 4 blind men, different stories have different numbers, is that we need to learn to listen to each other, to exchange our views, and get a better understanding of the problem that surrounds us. No longer is a time when the people in the village would have to wait for the government authorities to send their jeep and the technical personnel to solve their problem. They need to sit together, address the problem, see what resources are available, and how they can best manage those resources. And then, if external assistance is required, they can. I'm also a Gandhian, and that was the approach Mahatma Gandhi wanted free India to take. But unfortunately, policymakers and ideological issues and compulsions did not allow that kind of a village development to occur. So the panacea, I'm not here to offer a panacea to rid us of all our manifold crises, but we certainly can question those who are in positions of decision-making and authority. And we can do it with dignity and respect, not by agitating, not by vandalizing, not by destroying public property. That's not the approach. We can question, because this is the age where information is available to you at the click of the mouse. No one can hide. You know, in the past, information was with those in positions of power, and they would manipulate. So we need to question whether people, whether they be religious leader or secular leaders in the East or in the West, and whatever may be their ideological persuasion, we need to ask them to be accountable for the moral stewardship that they have presumed to exercise. Why have they failed to stop the conflicts and wars? To end the obscene disparities among the rich and the poor. The other day we were talking with spiritual sister Bhuvna about how this world's $85 trillion GDP, which is distributed among the developed countries and the developing and the least developed. 1% of the population occupies 99% almost of the world's resources. It's an insane disparity. They talk about universal basic income. If that were to be done on the basis of the world GDP, each one would be entitled to receive $8,000 per month. So like that, these can be discussed. So we talk about gender inequalities. Even today in India, though we claim we have made a lot of progress, yet women are not treated with full justice and respect and dignity. Oftentimes we read of the violence, we read of domestic abuse, and a lot of other issues. Our Creator created men and women, the masculine and the feminine. It's an acceptable reality. and how ignorant and how unfair we have been. So today, the struggle continues. Racism, casteism, religious fanaticism, to name a few of these most destructive tendencies. So we need to ask our leaders these questions and then tell them, where are those breakthroughs in the new realms of cultural achievement produced by the aggrandizement of this race or that caste, of this nation or that particular class? Why is the vast majority of the people sinking ever deeper into hunger and wretchedness when wealth, on a scale undreamed of in the past, is at the disposal of the present-day decision makers? Why have such awesome advances in the field of science and technology failed to live up to the promise of Shangri-La? You know, it's no longer a utopian reality. If human beings had truly adhered to the spiritual precepts and teachings, they would surely have made this planet Earth the mirror image of paradise. In India, there's a bit of a history here. We have been taught, from centuries and thousands of years by our sages and seers to live in a life of harmony with all sentient beings and with our natural surroundings. There was an established set of principles that ensured coherence and balanced lifestyle. Today, India has managed to popularize yoga. 21st June is the International Day of Yoga. And it has brought about a lot of, national pride, prestige for us. But it was intrinsic in our lifestyles. And other countries too had such beliefs and such practices. So with the march of civilization slow and steady when compared to contemporary times, the lifestyles changed, materialism became dominant feature of our existential reality. In the past, our natural surroundings were able to absorb much of the unhealthy patterns of behavior, and people believed that the carrying capacities of the natural habitat that provided shelter and sustenance were limitless. But that's not true. The finite resources of the planet, which are the birthright of every man, woman, youth, and child, there has to be a more equitable distribution. And there are limits to growth. There are umpteen number of reports that come out both from the United Nations and from other world institutions about what's happening to our planet, climate change, the global warming, the last great meeting in Glasgow where they talked about carbon neutrality. It actually was a follow-on to the Paris Accord of 2015. But again, not much positive emerged, except that some countries have pledged to become carbon neutral by 2050. India's pledge is that by 2070, and like that, there are a host of climate-related issues. I need not go into it. Religion offers an understanding of human existence and development that lifts the eye from the rocky path to the distant horizon. Does your religion do that? If your religion fosters them and us, we and they, prejudices, superiority, then you need to ask, that's not the kind of religion, or that's not the spiritual path that I should be walking on. Because religion is for love, harmony, peace, service. So when we are true to the transcendental spirit of the teachings of the founders, then it becomes a powerful force for the creation of new and beneficial patterns of individual and collective life on earth. So today, of course, this word you are familiar, many children, if you have not heard of this word, anthropogenic or Anthropocene, where the environment, where the climate, where the natural surroundings, as a result of the human activity, are adversely impacted. This planet has experienced extinction in the past, and people are reporting from time to time that we are experiencing the 6th mass extinction. What that fully translates into, we don't know, whether it means such a major catastrophe like the way the dinosaurs got wiped out 65 million years ago when hit by an asteroid, or whether it means very fundamental changes that need to be made. Nevertheless, the challenges are very serious, and there is something called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. And every year, they have a doomsday clock, and they adjust this clock. You know, when the pandemic started, we were just 120 seconds from midnight. And when this the European war started, they had to once again adjust this clock. And they said that today we are just 100 seconds from midnight. And two reasons. One was climate change, and the other was nuclear war. It could be accidental, it could be deliberate. And if any of these things, because climate change, a lot of reports are saying that we have passed the tipping point, or we are almost near the tipping point. There are various indices. Again, I did not go into the details. But nuclear war, I mean, already for the past 1 year, we have been reading in the media threats. A country which has a lot of nuclear weapons, for its own protection and survival, they said that we will go to the extent of starting a World War III. So there is a great social scientist and also a humanist, Noam Chomsky, who says that we are in the most critical phase of human history ever. And it's these two reasons. As Baha'i, as a member of the Baha'i community, I'm been an active member. We believe that science and religion, they should always be in harmony. So all the advances of science and all the technological benefits that we experience, this hall itself is such a powerful, tangible expression of that. Has to be in harmony with true religion. And if we all believe that religion is for love, peace, service, harmony, then surely we will be able to bring about a change, because the healthy interface of both these two systems of knowledge has helped civilization to advance. In the past, the domain of religion had the upper hand, or the spiritual teachings were very dominant. But today, science is a dominant force, and it has to once again harmonize. And a person like Einstein, when he said that if there is no science in religion, then it becomes blind, and if there is no religion in science, then it becomes lame. I hope I got the analogy correct. He, of course, was an agnostic, though he was born of a Jewish parentage, and he has given some very interesting insights. So the evolving consciousness of humanity is inexorably moving for the development of a new planet, a new planetary culture. Most of us who are here, we are conscious of that, but the vast majority of humanity out there, they aren't. So we need, one of the services that we need to provide is this awakening. So time, of course, is running out, because our humanity has appeared to be a delinquent species running out of control. But this larger vision of humanity's spiritual and social evolution is the theme. And whatever the number of speakers who have gone before me, they have in different ways touched upon it. And the emerging knowledge in physics, environmental studies, psychology, and other fields of science lies the promise of a mature, cooperative relationship between humanity and the ecosphere that gave it birth. Coming to education, our Temple of Understanding has been, for many years, in the forefront of promoting UNESCO's education for the 21st century. You know, UNESCO came up with a three-phase educational program. The first one, it was in the 1970s and 80s, and then before the turn of the century, they came up with a second phase, which was termed the Learning the Treasure Within. And the third phase talks about the futures of education, largely anchored upon the higher education aspects. So in this world of artificial intelligence, where some people describe a human being as a biological algorithm who will soon be overtaken by robotic sciences, we need to once again take a fresh look. And I look forward to, over the next 2 days, to also interacting with our young friends at the Sathya Sai University for Human Excellence, and sharing also the work that I do in promoting UNESCO's education for 21st century and in tandem with the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm sure many of you may have heard of these Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which has got 17 goals, 169 targets, 238 indicators. Because unlike the Millennium Development Goals, this was a very broad-based approach to addressing humanity's multifarious problems. And it took them 5 years. And all the 193 member states of the United Nations endorsed it. And some 8 million people have contributed in the crafting of this document. It is worth our time to study it. And the UNESCO's education, the 4 pillars that they talked about, I little bit must mention. From my Indian perspective, when I studied about the 4 pillars of education, one is, if learning is treasure within, that means in every human being, there are potentialities, there are gems of virtues, there are spiritual qualities. And what education does is to manifest these qualities. Every child that's born is a light to the world, but can also become a darkness. So when a child is deprived of the love, the family values, the sanskars, then it takes the path of violence, becomes a criminal. And today when we read about the stories of how a school child armed with a gun goes to a school and just randomly shoots down anyone, or a child falling prey to drugs, or getting into bad company, all of these, they show the deficiency of our education system. So the 4 pillars were very helpful. So learning to know, in Indian sense we say it is like Gyan Yoga. Learning to do is Karam Yoga. Learning to live together is Sahaj Yoga. And learning to be is the Atma Yoga. So it is there enshrined in our ancient texts. And the new education policy of the Government of India, which was released in July 2020, has also incorporated a great measure of the UNESCO's vision for education and the curricula, the kind of curricula that children need to be given. So I still need to learn more about the Sathya Sai system of education and its system of human excellence. But briefly, this is what we have been promoting. We organize workshops. One of the things we do is at the Baha'i Temple. We have an education center. And from the child of 3-year-old to an adult, 80-year-old, we have educational programs for them. And they are all designed in such a way that it comes about quite naturally. It's not an imposition. If you have not been to Delhi, or if you've never been to the Baha'i Lotus Temple, I very humbly invite all of you. If I'm given an advance notice, I'd like to be personally there to receive you. Or if I'm not available, I'll tell my colleagues. And every day, we have an average of about 16,000 to 17,000 visitors. And on weekends, it can be 30,000, 40,000. Of course, the last 2 years in between during the pandemic, we followed the government guidelines, and whenever the temple was to be closed down, no public functions, we had to follow that. But once again, now much of the things have become quite normal, and we'd love to invite you, and I hope I'm able to welcome Sadguru, Madhusudan Sai, and his team for a reception to the temple. I had the good fortune. Yes. I had the good fortune of organizing a visit for Sathya Sai Baba just some months before his Samadhi. It was a very wonderful spiritual program we had. He couldn't stay to visit the information center, which also is a wonderful place. But he enjoyed the prayer, and I could see, though he was not so well physically, yet he enjoyed every moment. And we were so lucky and delighted that it was possible to have him. So we have his grace and his blessings. So friends, I know my time is limited. Alarm bells have been sounded, and this is what the Baha'i writings say. Humanity would be best served and most effectively served by setting aside partisan disputation, pursuing united action that is informed by the best available scientific evidence and grounded in spiritual principles, and thoughtfully revising action in the light of experience. The incessant focus on generating and magnifying points of difference rather than building upon points of agreement leads to exaggeration that fuels anger and confusion, thereby diminishing the will and capacity to act on matters of vital concern. I mean, this is a daily reality. Why does the United Nations not be able to function? Because every member state comes with its own agenda, and they care a damn what happens to the world. They want the largest piece of the cake they can grab. And each one of them, many of my friends in Delhi, we have this India International Center, and we meet these diplomats, some of them retired, and they tell us that we are like that. We are trained like that, to only look at our own agenda, and we don't care about the world. They may talk about bilateral and multilateral relations. That's a very big subject in itself. But the United Nations is basically an association of nations. It's like a club. At the end of the day, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council with the veto power, they have the upper hand. So, and we have seen how when diplomats come together, or heads of state or heads of nations come together, and they dialogue with each other, what happens? So one of the most pressing problems of humanity in the current century is how a growing, rapidly developing, and not yet united global population can, in a just manner, live in harmony with the planet and its finite resources. The Universal House of Justice is our governing international council, and we have just been given a 9-year plan for our educational activities. So there is a universal ethic that urges every person to treat others as he or she would wish to be treated. And this is there in all the sacred scriptures. It is known as the Golden Rule. And the United Nations has declared the 5th of April as a Golden Rule Day, just as they have declared the first week of February as the Interfaith Harmony Week. You know, it took many, many decades of a lot of effort on the part of, the religious and spiritual community to leverage with the United Nations system to also acknowledge spiritual principles as an essential requirement for solving the problems of humanity. So today, finally, much has been attained. And in the numerous presentations of Sadguru, likewise, I have seen that his universal vision has been very beautifully brought out, and I will not go further much because of the time constraint. So the mounting realization on the part of the world's people is that the decades ahead are set to bring with them challenges among the most daunting that human family has ever had to face. The current global health crisis is but one such challenge. These challenges are a severe test of humanity's willingness to put aside short-term self-interest and come to terms with this stark spiritual and moral reality. There is but one interconnected human family, and it shares one precious homeland. In fact, this message was November 2021, and it was before the war in Europe. And the pandemic is now on its way out, but new variants keep coming. But we are still into deep trouble. So we need to examine anew the possibilities before us as we continue to learn to build communities of common purpose that recognize the power of unity to heal and transcend. And no wonder Sadguru Madhusudan Sai is placing so much of emphasis on the public health infrastructure and educational activities, because they have a very profound power to transform. So there is another example I want to add to the examples that we see around us. The Baha'i World Center is located in Haifa, Israel, and on Mount Carmel, we have this beautiful shrine, and there are 9 terraces above it and 9 below it. This is also one place where I'd like to invite our dearly loved Sadguru and his team, and if given an opportunity, I would like to take a delegation to Haifa, Israel, and expend time. We have had programs arranged for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We have had other spiritual leaders also come from time to time. So I hope someday we can all go together. It's going to be a wonderful and lasting experience. So I thought I should put this, and like this, there are many places all over Haifa and Akko. Friends, we are living in a world of technology, of science, and I'm showing you this picture that in 1 minute, 60 seconds, what happens? One of the things I asked, do the children have access to mobile phones? And I was very happy to learn that only the postgraduate, I think, students have an access to mobile. All the rest don't. And we know what it can do. Technology is neutral. It can be beneficial to us, and it can also be very harmful to us. A lot of young people have actually suffered from the negative impact. But in 1 minute, this is what happens. How many millions of people go on to, hundreds of thousands of people go to Google, to Netflix, to Facebook, to text messages, to the YouTube, to apps that are being downloaded, to Tinder. Many of these I myself have not gone. I know a little bit about the Facebook, I know YouTube, I do a lot of Google search for pieces of knowledge and information, but I'm not too much into the market. I mean, shopping, the Amazon. Today, sitting in your home, the Amazon can deliver anything you want. Even if you order an elephant, I'm sure the Amazon will make sure that it reaches you. So friends, this is just to give you a clue, and this is dated because it's 2018. I could not get a 2020 or 2021 data. When you look at these kinds of pieces of information, you just get appalled by the world in which we are living. I'm coming towards the end. There is a great ecologist named Richard Sainbar Baker, who was an Englishman and who lived in Africa as a forester. And when he saw the injustices committed by his own government, he was an officer of the British Empire, he relinquished that and he became one with the African people. And in Africa, he learned that concept of Ubuntu. You know, we are all together in this. No one can just go alone. If the world does not survive, then how do we survive? So he was a man of the trees. Even today, no one has beaten his record of the number of trees he has planted. And he talks about the trees as the skin of the earth. And he did scientific research. He said that any living organism, if 1/3 of its skin surface is removed, that living creature cannot survive. So today our planet is experiencing, when we talk about the climate change and the ecological crisis, the tree cover, the weather pattern changes, the climate change, all that has happened again because of human activity. I mean, Delhi, I used to live in, Bangalore, talking about Bangalore in the 1970s. Those days we could very proudly call it as a garden city, green, full of lakes. Today, where are those? In their place, you have the concrete jungles. So this man, he said, the historian of the future, looking back on the years from the invention of the steam engine to the growing dominance of the jet-propelled engine will have much to arrest his attention. He will be struck with immense strides in engineering and physical sciences. He will ponder upon our almost implicit belief that we are all sharing something called progress. Multitudes of people have worked and are still working away under the impression that the inevitable rewards are being brought nearer, when all the time they are rapidly undoing all that unaided earth itself built up in far-off ages. At the moment, the real issue facing the world is not whether this or that political system survives. It's merely a question of maintaining a national status quo. The real challenge is to humanity as a whole. And he asks the questions: are we fit to live? Are we fit to exist on earth? Can we unite to stem the oncoming tide of destruction, which by our folly we have let loose on ourselves? The answer to these questions will decide the future of our race, the human race. The tasks which confront us are sufficiently great in themselves to need the thoughtful and concerted action of every country on this globe. Erosion must be checked. He's talking about soil erosion, because all our agriculture is dependent upon the topsoil. Oncoming deserts must be stopped. Air and water pollution must be stopped. Land must be made fertile again with the help of trees of mixed species, and the earth once again be clothed in a green mantle of trees. The balance of nature must be restored. Paradise must be regained. Science cannot regain the paradise for us. It is we who believe in the spiritual value system, we who are committed to the religious ethos, will do it. So I know the time is quite limited, but at this conference, as human capacity for justice, reciprocity, and happiness are brought center stage, my humble plea to all those who are participating in this conference and those connected through various technological means would be to reflect upon the tremendous amount of learning that's occurring both in theory and practice, the many new friendships that we have made, a stronger belief in the goodness and nobility of all human beings, as more and more people commit themselves to make a distinctive and effective contribution in discovering the panacea underlying the essence of all religions. It is clear that spiritual masters and founders of great religions and the social milieus in which they were obliged to carry out their missions have provided powerful motivation for the creation of new and beneficial patterns of individual and collective life on earth. With this, I would like to close and end with two couplets. Thank you very much indeed. We had talks on mysticism, and I'd like to share two small couplets. There is one from the famous Jalaluddin Rumi. Rumi is very well known in the West. He says, "Thou brother, thou sister, art thy thought alone. A garden close, if that thought be rose. But if it be thorn, then only fit to burn." The rose, it charms us, we are attracted to it. But if we see thorns, we gather the thorns and use it as firewood. And the next one is also by a very famous mystic, Hafiz. He says, "Come, O ye people, men, women, youth and children, come. Let's scatter these roses. Let's pour out the nectar. Let's split the roof of heaven and draw a new design." So friends, conferences like this are sources of not only inspiration, but great motivation. It not only creates a tremendous amount of energy, of camaraderie, bonhomie, of fellowship, of goodwill. And if this can be disseminated far and wide, then surely this planet can be turned into the mirror image of that longed for paradise of that heaven of heavens. So we need not wait till our end of time on this planet for heaven, but we have work to do. And if we are together, then surely the cosmic energy, the divine, will help come to our aid and help us bring to realization this lofty goal. So with these words, I once again thank everyone. And the task of summarizing actually would be superfluous because every speaker has taken us to a higher spiritual realm in their own unique ways, whether they have used the vocabulary of religion or the words from science or words from the social discourse, each one of them, starting with the inaugural address by Sadguru and continuing with Cardinal Anthony Pola, with our Professor Hafizur Rahman, the Sufi, with Dharmacharya Santam Seth, the disciple of Thich Nhat Hanh, a very good friend of mine. He has got a very nice retreat center at Nainital in Uttarakhand. Then Dr. Sarina Molina, who took us, she kept us very well grounded. She talked about the mental crisis, the stress, and a host of, societal problems backed up by scientific data. I truly appreciated her contribution. We had Rabbi Jackie Tabik. We had, she in her own Jewish, manner of cultural ethos, presented her concerns and her very powerful convictions. We had Ms. Gitanjali JB. I also enjoyed very much. In fact, each one of them, they were a star in their presentations. Our Professor Jayant Kapatikar, who took us into that scientific journey and taught us that how the consciousness within actually helps us to realize many of the advanced scientific truths based on the laws of physics. We had Dr. Benjamin Zhang, who in his own inimitable style talked about how ethics is an integral aspect of business and the world in which we live. And he has shown that it can be done successfully. We had Swami Anubhavananda, who in his humorous style, based on his own personal experiences, also taught us how to remain in a state of happiness. Mauj mein raho. Be in a state of joy and happiness, and don't worry too much about what others say and do. We just heard a short while ago my good friend Geshe Lado Sangpo, who, coming from the Tibetan Buddhist background, shared stories about Buddha, how anger and frustration and the negative emotions pull us down. And he gave some interesting insights for personal development. Again, Madam Gulsha Begum, whom I know personally, she shared her Sufi convictions and the various branches of Sufism and how she has linked that up with the Indian ethos of the chakras and the Kundalini rising. So again, there is a certain ambience, a certain amount of independence granted to a practitioner. And she asked that question and herself gave the answer. So at the end, I believe that howsoever great the intractable problems we may be confronting today, yet at the end of the day, our spiritual resources can surely help us tide over the crises, because I'm a firm conviction that the period into which humanity is moving into, or has already moved in, actually beckons every individual, every institution, and every community unprecedented opportunities. It gives us unprecedented opportunities to participate in the rewriting of this planet's history. So in a nutshell, I've tried to capture the importance of religion and spirituality as a very powerful panacea for the future of humanity, a future of light, happiness, and joy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. A.K. Merchant, for that inspirational, heartfelt talk about all religions and for summarizing the conference so beautifully. We extend our heartfelt gratitude and love to all the panelists of this entire conference. And I would like to request Dr. Hanumant Rao Naidu, Registrar Administration of the University, to please present a token of our love to Geshe Lado Sangpo. And also to Dr. A.K. Merchant. And we request for a group photo, please. Thank you, and with that we conclude session 4. We request all to be seated by 5:15 p.m. for the valedictory function of the conference. Sai Ram.